Welcome. Today we are going to delve into one of the best cosmic horror movie ever made. The Empty Man, released in 2020. But please, before I continue, pause, go and watch it again, because you may need to refresh yourself with some of the terms and directions we are going to discuss. Now, let's start where it all began. Greg, Fiona, Ruthie, and Paul go hiking in the Ura Valley, Bhutan. Bhutan is a remote, ancient location where the veil between the human and the incomprehensible is perilously thin. Somehow similar to Rhea, the sunken city of Cthulhu, where the great old one dreams, waiting to influence humanity. When Paul begins to hear a sound no one else hears, he was already chosen as the vessel. After falling into a crevice of a cave, he is shown unharmed but sitting in a lotus position, in a sort of trance. In front of him, an eerie humanoid skeleton. This is where the story begins its descent into cosmic horror. The skeleton is not merely a dead body, it's an anchor or a physical manifestation of a vast, malevolent entity that exists outside human comprehension. Paul's physical contact with the skeleton, and possibly his mental state at the time, creates a link between him and the entity. In Lovecraftian terms, this is akin to someone stumbling upon an artifact tied to Nyarlathotep or another outer god. A brush with the unknowable that reshapes their entire existence. Paul becomes a vessel for this entity, much like Wilbur Whateley in the Dunwich Horror. His catatonic state isn't merely physical, it's his mind and soul overwhelmed by the presence of something far beyond human understanding, an echo of what happens to those who gaze into the abyss for too long in Lovecraft stories. He remains in this catatonic state, except when he gets up to whisper something into Ruthie's ear, which culminates with her killing her friends and herself. It seems this is how he passes the entity's influence onto her, planting the seeds of its psychic control. We see the same thing when Amanda whispers something into Brandon's ear, which also doesn't end up well. It could be interpreted as a way for the Empty Man to recruit new vessels or expand its reach, much like the spreading madness in Lovecraft's The Call of Cthulhu. The Empty Man made me do it. This phrase appears scrawled at multiple crime scenes, and it's repeated by characters who commit violent acts. It encapsulates the central theme of the Empty Man, the loss of agency under the influence of a greater, incomprehensible force. From a Lovecraftian perspective, this is a hallmark of cosmic horror. The Empty Man entity represents a vast, uncaring intelligence that doesn't just overpower its victims physically but subsumes their minds and wills. The phrase suggests that individuals aren't acting of their own volition. Rather, their thoughts, actions, and even identities are hijacked by the Empty Man. The act of blowing into a bottle on a bridge ties into the urban legend surrounding the Empty Man. According to the myth, on the first night, you hear the Empty Man's whistle. On the second night, you see the Empty Man. On the third night, the Empty Man comes for you. The ritual of blowing into the bottle serves as a summoning mechanism, a way to connect to the entity or invite its attention. Bridges often symbolize transitions in mythology and horror, acting as liminal spaces where the boundaries between worlds blur. Blowing into the bottle is both a symbolic act and a literal call to the unknown. So let's talk about Amanda's discussion on thoughts having mass and physical consequences, ties directly into the concept of tulpas. In Buddhist mysticism, a tulpa is a thought form, a being or entity created through intense mental focus or collective belief. In The Empty Man, this idea is taken to a horrifying extreme. Amanda explains that the universe itself is a kind of mind, and what we perceive as reality is malleable, subject to the influence of collective thought. Now let's talk about the Pontifex Institute. Like Lovecraft's cults, they act as intermediaries between humanity and an incomprehensible cosmic force. They are manipulating James into realizing his role as a vessel for the Empty Man. Every clue he follows, every interaction he has, is carefully orchestrated by the Institute to lead him to the revelation that he is not real. James is a tulpa, a thought form created by the Pontifex Institute to house the Empty Man. His memories, his sense of self, and his entire existence are fabrications designed to fulfill the needs of the entity. This is why his life begins unraveling as the film progresses. He was never truly a person to begin with, and the truth of his existence begins to overwhelm him. The concept of a human being created solely to serve as a vessel for a cosmic entity mirrors themes in stories like the Dunwich Horror, where Wilbur Whateley exists primarily to bring forth his monstrous sibling, Yog-Sothoth's spawn. At the end of the movie, James calls Nora, desperate for answers, only for her to claim she doesn't know him. This moment is key to the film's ultimate revelation. James doesn't exist. The Pontifex Institute created James as a tulpa, a thought form, designed to act as a temporary vessel for the Empty Man. His memories, relationships, and even his sense of self are fabricated. Nora's denial of knowing James isn't out of malice or confusion. It's because she understands the truth. James is not real in the traditional sense, and his existence is purely functional, serving the needs of the entity. Her denial is a brutal acknowledgement of the artificiality of James's identity. This idea is deeply Lovecraftian in its implications. James's reality is not only false but insignificant in the face of the larger, incomprehensible forces at work. Much like the manufactured identities and manipulated lives in stories like The Shadow Out of Time, James's life is a construct shaped by the will of the entity. The Empty Man stands as a modern cosmic horror gem, encapsulating Lovecraftian themes of insignificance, the fragility of the human mind, and the terrifying realization of truths too vast for comprehension. It's a chilling reminder that the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine. Tell me what you think in the comments, and thank you for watching. Don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button. See you next time.